it's very different to have the kind of violence you might have had in like that you have in Japan right now. Like I'm sure there's occasional murders, but it's not tribal war, which is what's emerging in these multicultural civilizations. That's what we're worried about, and that's what I mean when I say like we didn't have to get to this point. Now maybe it's too late now to go back. Maybe the cat's out of the bag, but it's like this was a mistake, right? You know that you can't just force people together like this and
It's
then
not
expect.
force, it's the natural pattern of
No, I disagree
migration.
with that.
So you
Listen,
either have to stop the people from coming in the first place, and the only way to do that
yes,
is through
yes.
violence.
No, that's not. It's not violence to build a wall to keep people out of your
Building walls
civilization.
isn't enough. You have
It's
to
not.
shoot
It's
people
not.
at the wall. Building a wall is not
Okay.
enough to keep
Yeah,
people
like
out. You have
Israel.
to detain
They'll
them.
they'll learn.
Exactly. That's what they do in Israel. They shoot people who try to penetrate
Okay.
the wall.
Well, I
Yeah.
prefer
Based.
that sort of violence. That sort of violence keeps my own people safe, and so it only falls on people who are trying to break into my house.
That's what I say. Everybody kills. Everybody has the same. It gets back to property ownership. In essence, is a form of violence. But if you're going to have property ownership, the only way to protect the property is through the use of violence. And we said everybody kills. Everybody uses violence. There's nothing special about the blue-eyed man or the Muslims or anybody else in the use of violence. Violence is an open tool to all humans.
Right, but Duvid, I mean, you're operating with the fundamental understanding that there are people who have claimed territory and there are people who are trying to encroach upon it. And one could make a very simple argument that this territory in the United States or New Zealand's territory in New Zealand, that is theirs, that is their territory. Anyone who is not them that is there is essentially a guest, and they can revoke their presence. But what you argue for is for us to not kick out people who are essentially invaders in our lands. What you're saying is that, oh no, globalism's already here. The Muslims already have a foothold in New Zealand, so they should be able to stay and bring their family. I mean, it's like, I don't understand. There's like an inherent contradiction in your position.
Mossad to do with 9/11 text.
Well, I say if Mossad might have known about it and not sharing that information with America, but I mean, I don't think there's any evidence that Mossad did the attacks. We know it was Saudi Arabian people that actually carried it out. So I mean, it's different that saying that okay, like I'm a intelligent guy and I gather a bunch of independent scholarship information in who I choose to share that information with. That doesn't make me the perpetrator if I don't share that information.
Duvid, are you saying that, like, is your argument that like multicultural societies are inevitable, that they're natural? I mean, because it seems to me that the existence of like races, the existence of white people suggests something like 9,000 years of living apart. I don't know why you think the last 50 years, was natural or inevitable. You're saying technology is basically like the internet and mass travel is forcing this new thing. This is why I like where
I think technology is the biggest factor causing multiculturalism.
I just want to say I think we really are, like, the ship has sailed in part because, and Faust, please tell me what you think, but I'm worried that the ship has sailed because we use the internet, like the whole world speaks English and watches CNN and everybody goes into a panic on Twitter at the same time.
That's inaccurate. Only like 30% of the world speaks English. And that's you're saying, okay, if you're the multiculturalist who accepts globalizations, like you got to start learning Chinese and different languages because it's a fallacy that the whole world speaks English.
Okay, but I mean, there are a shrinking number of languages and eventually we're all going to speak either Mandarin or English.
But from my knowledge, actually, the number of English-speaking people is decreasing due to the decline of Anglo power. That there's less reason.
White genocide.
People have worked methodically for at least 150 years to achieve this end.
Well, maybe we worked at it for 4,000 years. But do you accept the premise that naturally people are going to do what they have to do in order to get ahead, in order to survive?
It's a bad thing you've been working on for 4,000 years. That's what we're saying, is that you're smushing people together, and that's where the violence is coming from.
Well, that's the difference from the believer perspective. That's God doing it. It's not the Jewish people doing it.
Well, it's a bad God.
Yeah, man, the concept of the ship has sailed I mean, to a certain degree, I agree with that. It's hard to deny. We've lost a lot of territory. The population increases within our own nations is going up and up and up, while ours is going down. And I kind of view this as, there's a dysgenic aspect going on here. But I will say, I view it as a concentration almost. Like the weakest links are being pulled away, and it's bad and it's painful, and I don't want it to happen. But what I see happening is, as white people become more and more racially conscious, those capable of surviving the onslaught are starting to form groups together. And I don't really know if there's any way to turn this process around at this point. Like the consciousness raising aspect that's going on here is, I only see it increasing, not decreasing.
But I mean, you
I don't
agree
know
it's
about you guys.
technological. I mean, there might be Jews or different globalists involved, but it's basically technology that's the cause of it.
No,
No, not at all.
it's a medium, sure, but the cause of it versus the response to it, essentially what I'm seeing is whites transition into diaspora type behavioral patterns
Yeah.
that are distinct to us. And I mean, how?
But
else
that's just because you're decreasing power. That I mean, the white man is naturally doing what they have to do in order to survive and get ahead, and just like everyone does.
This is very dishonest.
Listen, Duvid, the thing is, you just said in the chat that you're not, I said somebody said it's the Jewish order. And you said, well, it's actually God's order. It's God's nature that's making this all happen. The thing is, and the reason this is so important, and the reason that Christians understood this for 1800 years, is that there are sort of two ways that global order can emerge. On the one hand, it can be multicultural, where everybody sort of cordons off and retreats into their corner. On the other hand, you can have the Christian Catholic universal order. The problem is that whenever we try to build that, the Jews go oh no, but we're not going to join, right? And so this problem, this seems to be, it's we're not allowed to resolve the problem either way. Except
universalism for thee, non-universalism for me.
I mean, we're supposed to accept the Jewish God, but what, we're not his chosen? You think that's going to work? 16
You don't
million?
have to.
That's crazy.
If me personally, I look for the answers to these questions in the Hebrew prophets, although I look at all the evidence, but the main weight I give is to the ancient prophets. But you're welcome to look at it in any way you want.
Hey, so breaking news. It looks like Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, is getting threats, ISIS-style threats from someone named Sofian al-Muslim, saying revenge is coming with a AK-47 with a bunch of Arabic written on it.
To Duvid's point about everybody kills, everyone's violent. It's funny to me. The initiation of the state of Israel was a program of violence by Jewish people to wrest a land that was not theirs from other people. And it's not lost on me that the representative of that tribe here is simply saying, well, everyone does this. Well, it's the natural order. When it seems to me, if you look at the last 100 years in the United States of America, or the initiation of the state of Israel, it seems to me, well, while it might be a natural capacity for people to be violent, it seems to be the preferred method of a group of people who then lie about it.
And I want to say something. There is this, yes, people kill each other, okay? The question is, do they kill each other on the battlefield, or do they kill each other in their marketplace? Are your women and children targets of your neighbor of a different background? Or do you send your 19-year-old son to go fight their sons and deal with it that way? And I think, this is the question, what's the better way? Duvu would basically say, well, basically this force putting us together, this invisible hand of the market, is irresistible. and we have no choice but to live together in tension and risk terrorist attacks on our, in the malls, at our churches, at our mosques, at our synagogues, so on and so forth. And we just need to learn each other's language. And I think that is a sort of fatalistic view, and sort of resigning oneself to the fate of living under what are essentially hellish conditions. Like, why not? Wouldn't it be better to just separate and not have this? Like, this white man should never have had access to a mosque because the mosque shouldn't have been there.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at solutions, and to be like, oh, he should have never had weapons. He should have never
this
been
is the
able
question.
to
What
use
is the solution?
internet.
Let's look forward. I mean, okay, I
saying there
agree
is
with
no
you.
solution.
Hold on, David. I agree with you that violence is inevitable in these types of circumstances. So how do we avoid it? What do we do? Or what's going to happen?
Well, unfortunately, I don't think we can avoid it. Like, I'd be more apocalyptical and think, God forbid, we're going to see a lot more of this.
So no solution. Okay, thanks.
Well, I mean, to us, there's obvious solutions, right? It's like, as Brundle said, if they weren't here, there wouldn't be a problem. The concept of proximity plus diversity equals war. I mean, and Duvid's essentially echoed that statement. It's like, you observe this as a fact, yet advocate for more and more diversity plus proximity. It's like, from our perspective, or at least from mine, Duvid, it's you who's advocating for the conditions which create violence.
You can have your position, but it's saying, obviously, you're the one who has to hide under an assumed identity. If not, you would be the one on hate watch. You would be the one suffering the consequences because the majority of society disagrees with you. I mean, that's a factual element.
This is more dishonesty.
More straw manning.
It's not a straw manning. You're not going to show your face. You know that the second you show your face, you will be on hate watch.
There's an entire panel attempting to get someone who is self-avowed anti-white to agree with us. It's completely irrelevant what he says.
Obviously, I have the library here. I studied this stuff, and I'm making two different. I'm not even talking about my biblical beliefs. I would talk about human nature. I wanted to talk about censorship and the role of what you guys are saying. Like, this guy basically shared your beliefs.
I just want to. This is really funny to me. I love it. He does the same thing every time. You hide behind avatars. That's a straw man. Then he goes into look at all the books behind me. So now he's intellect signaling. He does the exact same thing every time.
David, so something we had talked about: the role of censorship in driving this man to violence. Go.
Well, I was saying the role of censorship after that. You say one thing. The video being removed, the condition, people being told do not play this video, all of the media platforms being told not to share that video. We talked about that with Josh yesterday, where I talked about not only your ideas, you guys should feel safe to say that I think violence should not be censored, and Donald Trump making the point about ISIS and all these torture videos. And like in Israel, when something like this happens, all the media shows the blood and the gore. So that's one level of censorship. If you just want to discuss the censorship of violence, and to me, the censorship of language, that I'm not sure. Say, if this is inevitable and people openly talking about these ideas accelerates people, God forbid, doing these type things, I would still favor the free speech. Although you could argue on the other side that censoring this stuff is actually what accelerates the violence, and that if people had been more open, or from a pure, I don't know if we got any computer geeks on the panel now, what would it have been if everybody had access to the information?
The idea where you want to normalize or not censor discussions around violence, I mean, that
I don't want to censor violence itself.
Subversive.
So I'm making two separate points. One is about the censorship of the actual violence. How come how come the video can't be seen? So I mean, the words are a different issue than the actual censorship of the violence itself.
People are not allowed to see actual representations of violence.
Only in America.
Related instances of violence. If people actually saw what was happening,
unless
they would have
it's
been
on World